The man that I met there.
Put it right here if you want. And I'll
anybody
let you
eat it.
The man that I met there
somewhere.
said
Thank you.
what
You're the
was the
hostess
most
with the
interesting
mostest.
thing. I'm gonna record this. The most interesting thing to find out from your ancestors is what kind of trouble did you get in when you were a kid? That's what he said you need to find out.
Really?
What did you and your brothers get into?
What did I and my brothers? Well, pretty much my brother Bob was younger than us, and George was a couple of years older. So we had our own groups, you know. Vince and Jim used to go with George and some other guys from Riverside, and I don't know about trouble. I mean, we're pretty well steered clear of it. Trouble in my day was during Prohibition. And the boys in the neighborhood could take a boat and go across the Niagara River into a little place called Frenchman's Creek. It's just on the other side of across from the island, you know. And if you had a little money, you could go and buy Canadian whiskey, you know. And you could bring Canadian whiskey back here and get it in the country, because there wasn't much patrol the way there is now on the river or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if they could get back here with a couple of bottles of Canadian whiskey, which wasn't too expensive in Canada, they could sell it for 5 times what it was worth over there, because nobody had any whiskey here.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's what the bad kids did.
That was the bad thing. But the thing was that my father worked for the customs office.
So you better not be doing.
We were not allowed to be found.
Yeah.
So did his Border Patrol.
We were not allowed to be found anywhere near the riverfront, you know, at any time during that. My father said, that's one thing I don't want from any of you. Stay away from that river and don't get caught in any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And they did it anyway.
No, not his brothers. No.
Oh, okay.
He was talking about the bad kids from the neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
No, there was kids in the neighborhood who did it. Though.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they thought we were nuts because we didn't do it, because they were making big money.
But you did come rolling home one night, and your father had to talk to you about that. I remember you telling us that.
Yeah.
That your dad told you that they would make more and you couldn't drink it all. Remember that?
Oh, that was after Prohibition. Though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was after Prohibition. I went out with a bunch of friends of mine.
Bad influences.
And we drank a beer, you know. None of us were used to drinking beer.
Yeah.
And of course, I got to what happened was that when we got to my house, they let me off, you know.
Yeah.
And just about that time, my next door neighbor, who was a city court judge, came home. And I get out of this car, and there's the judge standing right there on this porch, you know, and next door to us. He lived in that corner house, you know. And my father lectured me on that a little bit, you know. He says, they make more than you can drink, so don't try to drink it all.
That's good advice.
Saying that.
That's good advice.
So it was good enough advice for me. We went to work together. My father worked for H.D. Taylor's downtown, and he got me a job there. I was working in the supply room down there, you know, a big wholesale place. And they sold paints, they sold car parts, they sold everything there. H.D. Taylor's.
What was your dad's job?
My dad's job was an accountant.
Oh, okay.
He was an accountant for the government during Prohibition. He worked as an accountant at the government agency, and then, you know, when the Depression came, well, then it was pretty hard for anybody to hold a job, you know. So he had left the government and gone into H.D. Taylor's. That's how he got there. Somebody told him, well, you can make more money at H.D. Taylor's than you can working for the government, which was true at the time. But then when the bad times hit, why then H.D. Taylor's couldn't handle all them people. But he stayed on there, and he was then a salesman, and he had 1931 Chevy, and he would drive down to Pennsylvania and cover all of the northern part of Pennsylvania there with H.D. Taylor's goods. Visit a garage here and sell them some stuff, you know. He did pretty good. He did pretty good.
So then you went to work with him?
Huh?
You went to work with him?
No, I went to work for H.D. Taylor's.
Oh, okay.
But I was just a guy that unloaded stuff, you know, that came in and put it on the shelves and that kind of stuff. I made about $15 a week, which was very good salary.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was hard work, and we worked every day, Saturday included, to earn that $15.
And this was during the Depression?
Huh?
This was during the Depression that you worked there?
Yes, it was very bad times for everybody. So that's the way you got by. I mean, you took any job you could get. George at the time worked for
DuPont, right?
Oh, he worked for the. I think the DuPont.
Yeah. He worked for DuPont.
And he was a slitter or something. And, he had a good job too. Him and Uncle Vince, they worked there. Vince got him a job. And they made good money there, but that was another place. And during the Depression, if you had a job and you were making things and they was shipping, why you stayed working. But if the customers that they sold this stuff with cellophane to, if they were stocked up on their stuff, they just stopped ordering. Then they stopped making cellophane, and then you'd be laid off for 2 or 3 months, you know.
Yeah.
So either way, it was not easy going, and it wasn't anything like you've got a guaranteed job now. Like when I went to work after the war for the telephone company, if you got in and you'd done your job, you were good for the rest of your life, you know. But there were no such places like that during the Depression at all. It all depended on what they could sell and how the market went, you know. That was a real bad depression, I'll tell you that.
How did people who didn't have jobs and had families, there were no soup kitchens, were there? Or
yeah, well,
were there food banks or?
Not what you call them now, because nobody had the money to put into it. But we had what we call man a block. Now, everybody agreed that if there was somebody on their block that didn't have a job and had a family to take care of, everybody in that block that was working would have put in maybe 50 cents. Now that would keep that man and his family in a home and food. And the man would do favors for anybody that he worked for. He was actually working for the people in the block,
for the neighbors.
and they call him a man of block. And he would like shovel snow or cut grass or whatever needed to be done, you know. So everybody made out all right on the deal.
Sounds like everybody had a turn doing it too.
Huh?
Sounds like everybody had a turn doing it too if people were getting laid off a lot.
Yeah, everybody was in the same boat. There was nothing about being poor.
Yeah.
We had parties. And everybody in the neighborhood would come to the party, you know. You brought something, he brought something, and you put in a little money to buy the beer, didn't cost much. I mean, it never cost you more than 50 cents to have a big party with a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
That's when we built that bar down in George's cellar down there. We built that, and a guy across the street, he worked for a place that sold steel. I can't remember the name of the place, but it was a downtown shop, and he worked as a delivery man and a direction man and that house of George's, the front part of it was Grandpa's storage cellar, and they would buy potatoes and apples and all that stuff when the season was, and you put all of that down in the front half of the basement was sealed off from the back half, and it was cold up there. It was a brick wall, and it was a cold cellar, and they would put potatoes and apples and anything like that you could keep over the winter and put them in a bin down there. And what fruit you couldn't, they would put in jars.
Yeah.
No, we never bought any of that stuff in cans or anything like that. It was, you bought it when the farmers had it, and
You canned it.
you canned it, and you put it up on the shelves. And that's the way you got by. You got by as cheap as you could.
Yeah.
Because that's all it was cheap for years there, you know. So everybody just got on fine.
And help each other.
Yeah, they helped together. Everybody helped. Yeah. One guy might be a bricklayer or something like that. You know, somebody needs something fixed, they'd hire him and pay him. It was a lot cheaper than having a guy with a craft come in. If he knew how to do it, he'd done the job for you. He'd done it cheap, and a couple of bucks, and you got it done. You know.
Yeah.
It was a bad time for everybody. It was worse than this, what we call a depression here now. I mean, I imagine there's people now that have a hard time